China's history? It's huge. We're talking 2,000 years of incredible highs and devastating lows. And trying to wrap your head around all of it, it can feel, well, totally overwhelming. So, how in the world do you even begin to make sense of all that? Well, it turns out there's this hidden logic, almost like a political operating system that was running in the background for centuries. It basically dictated the rise and fall of every great empire. And if you understand that pattern, everything starts to click into place. And that engine? We call it the dynastic cycle. It's this repeating pattern of a dynasty coming to power, bringing peace, then slowly falling apart, and finally collapsing. This is what defined imperial China for ages. Okay, so what powered this whole cycle? It was this incredible concept called the mandate of heaven. And look, this wasn't just some dusty philosophical idea. No, this was the ultimate justification for who got to rule. The deal was, if you were a just ruler, the heavens had your back. But if you got corrupt, well, things like floods and famines were seen as cosmic signs that you'd lost that divine favor. And that meant the people had every right to overthrow you. So here's how it played out again and again. Step 1. A new, powerful dynasty rises up and unifies the country. Then comes a golden age of peace and prosperity. But, nothing lasts forever. Over time, corruption creeps in, the government gets weak, and disasters start to hit. That's the signal, right? The mandate of heaven is gone. And boom, rebellions erupt, the whole thing collapses, and the cycle starts all over again with a new contender. All right, let's see this thing in action. We're going to look at two of China's most famous dynasties, the Tang and the Song, because they really show this cycle and all its weird complexities perfectly. First up, the Tang dynasty. People talk about this as a real high point, a true golden age. I mean, its capital, Chang'an, was literally the largest city on Earth. We're talking 1 million people. It was this incredible melting pot, merchants, monks, artists from all over the world, from Persia to India. The Tang was confident, it was powerful, and it was incredibly open to the outside world. Then, right after the Tang, you get the Song dynasty. And this is where things get wild. The Song unleashed an economic and tech revolution that was just mind-blowing. Seriously, this wasn't just a little bit of progress. For a while, this was the most advanced society on the planet. Think about it. They had the world's first government-issued paper money, the first real recipe for gunpowder. They were using the compass for sea travel. They had movable type printing. Their iron production was so massive that Europe wouldn't catch up for another 700 years. It's incredible. But here's where we hit a huge paradox. The Song leaders were basically haunted by how the Tang dynasty ended. It was overthrown by one of its own powerful generals. So to stop that from ever happening again, they made a deliberate choice. They weakened their own military. And you know what? Internally, it worked. They were super stable. But it left them completely exposed to these tough, nomadic empires on their northern border. A fatal flaw. And that military weakness, well, it eventually led to something that really broke the cycle. A full-on foreign conquest. So let's dig into how that invasion and the massive Chinese comeback that followed completely changed the game. So the Mongols sweep in, conquer all of China, and set up their own dynasty, the Yuan. Now, to keep control over this massive population, they created this incredibly rigid social pyramid, and it was all based on ethnicity. Right at the top, the Mongols, of course, then came their foreign allies. And way, way down at the bottom were the southern Chinese, the ones who fought back the hardest. They faced the most discrimination. And yet, and this is a big yet, even though society was so divided inside China, the Mongol Empire actually connected China to the rest of the world like never before. They created what's called the Pax Mongolica, or the Mongol Peace. It made the entire Silk Road safe to travel, leading to this huge explosion of trade and ideas between East and West. Things like gunpowder and printing, this is when they really started flowing into Europe. Eventually, a massive peasant rebellion kicks the Mongols out, and a new dynasty, the Ming, takes over, reestablishing Han Chinese rule. And at first, these guys were thinking big, like global big. They sent out Admiral Zheng He with these enormous treasure fleets that sailed all the way to Africa, projecting power across the seas. But, and it's a huge but, this global ambition didn't last. The court turned inward. They put in place a sea ban to stop private trade, let their amazing navy just rot away, and instead poured all their resources into building the Great Wall. China basically turned its back on the ocean. So for centuries, this cycle just kept going. A dynasty would rise, it would fall, another would take its place. But then we get to the 19th century. And this time, something was different. Something was broken. This wasn't just another dynasty on its way out. This was the entire system, that 2,000-year-old operating system, completely shattering. The dynasty in charge at the time, the Qing, got hit with an absolute perfect storm. On one hand, you had all the classic signs of decay from within. Corruption was rampant, people were suffering. But at the exact same moment, they got hit with a totally new kind of threat from the outside, the industrializing powers of the West. And they had no idea how to handle it. And that internal crisis was just staggering. A massive civil war called the Taiping Rebellion broke out, and it led to something like 20 to 30 million deaths. Let that sink in. That's more people than died in all of World War I. This conflict absolutely gutted the Qing state from the inside. And while all that was happening, China was getting hammered by foreign powers. A string of humiliating military defeats, starting with the Opium Wars, just shattered China's sense of self and its sovereignty. They were forced to sign these unequal treaties, giving up land like Hong Kong and handing over massive economic control. They were basically losing control of their own country. So, yeah, the old imperial system wasn't just bent, it was broken beyond repair. And that set the stage for the 20th century, which became this incredibly violent, chaotic, desperate search for a new system, for anything that could make China unified and strong again. It was a total mess. The last emperor steps down in 1912, and they try to set up a republic. But that falls apart almost immediately, and the country fractures into the warlord era. Then comes a brutal invasion from Japan, which is followed by a devastating civil war between the nationalists and the communists. The final act of this century of chaos was the communist victory in 1949. After decades of being torn apart, China was finally unified again, but under a brand new system, a powerful, highly centralized state that put an end to all the fragmentation.
Okay, so after all that, what does any of this ancient history mean for China today? Well, as you'll see, the echoes of this imperial past are everywhere. You just can't ignore them.
No, that great rupture in the 19th century really did break the old patterns for good. The dynastic cycle, it's gone. The mandate of heaven, a thing of the past. But so much else endures. The deep, powerful ideal of a unified China, the belief that you need a strong central government to prevent chaos, the ability to launch these massive state-run projects, all of that has roots that go back thousands of years. And that leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. The old cycle is over, for sure. But that deep, deep desire for unity and the absolute terror of chaos that drove that cycle for 2 millennia, that's still there. It continues to shape China's path today. So the real question is, how does a 2,000-year-old political DNA influence a nation's journey in the 21st century?